Yeah. 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 So many lies that you hear from the net, they don't get her respect. She reporting the truth, not a check. You want an unbiased opinion straight from the chest, not a bit of accomplice or someone here for a check. Tune in, these are thoughts from a lawyer on a mission who goes so hard it's like she works on commission. Trolls in the comments might say she tripping cause they lack the knowledge. They don't know they missing. Got a couple current events that you like. Wanna know about law from the eyes. Tired of all these blogs running lies because their agendas are disguised. Tune in to the intellect, cause I'm sure y'all missing all the facts of the case that she steady is gifting. Someone here for the people, man, it's so uplifting. If you ain't subscribed yet, then you just omitting facts.
You's a clown, that's what you. Why don't you call me a cardboard bishop now? Huh? You tough? Call me a cardboard bishop now.
He's not gonna call you that.
Huh? Look on Facebook Live. Call me a cardboard bishop now. You clown. That's what you are. You clown. That's what you are. Why don't you say what you say on Facebook Live, sucker?
No.
And this is the attitude that is what got him in this situation. Well, part of what got him in this situation that he was just convicted of today. So he was convicted today. That is, for those of you that don't know, Bishop Lamor Whitehead was convicted today of 5 counts. And we will go over all the counts when the jury came back and the judge said guilty, guilty, guilty again, guilty and guilty. And your girl was there in order to get those to hear those guilty verdicts firsthand. I didn't know if I was gonna make it. You know, I've been trying to fight the good fight for you guys for the last couple of weeks, but it got hard. It got rough last night. We started coming here, and then Pennsylvania decided to have a whole snowstorm. And then I said, devil use a whole lie. I'm about to sit there and see what this verdict is. So we ended up making it, and I walked in at about 11 o'clock in the morning, and I'm sure Whitehead was like, damn, the weather ain't stopping. No, you wasn't going to stop. It wasn't going to stop me. That was going to stop me, okay? I was going to come here, and I was going to finish the test. I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I've completed my race, and his stuff is completed today. So anyway, I walk into the court on today. I'm going to get right into it because I know for all of the members, they already know that I was texting a lot of things in real time. So they knew when the deliberation occurred, it was around 2:45. They also knew that when the first note came out, and then not too long after that, there was actually a verdict. So they were probably the first ones on this whole planet that knew that he was guilty of all 5 counts, because only attorneys in the federal court were able to have phones. So therefore, even any articles that came out would have been after, you guys knew. So you guys already knew what was up. So anyways, let's start from the beginning. So I walk in, and the prosecutor is giving their opening statement. Make sure you guys hit that like button because I'm just going to keep it moving because your girl is tired. I've been up since 5 this morning. But I wasn't going to leave you guys hanging. So I walk in, and they have the video up of the government is putting on their summation or closing arguments. They started with count 5. You know what count 5 is? Count 5 is those fake, fraudulent bank statements. So they had it on the screen where it said number 5, count 5 is just no dispute. So we just gonna start with the easy. We got the real versus the fake. So they had it up on the screen. So then they said there's no dispute because all defendant claims when he testified wasn't me. That was it. He ain't came with no argument he ain't came with nothing for real. He said, but it's the government said it's very, very interesting that whoever submitted these documents to Fundera to try to get this loan, they knew everything about Whitehead. They knew his birth date. They knew his social security number. They knew his employee ID for that anointing management services. They knew both his email addresses. They knew all of his phones. That's just very interesting that whoever randomly decided to submit this application, they knew everything about him. He said, but defendant was the only one that got this money. That's very interesting as well. So this is how there's no dispute that this count is what it is, that he is guilty of this count. Then he said, the third reason was defendant actually spoke with someone from Fundera. And he told them how they could contact him. They gave him his phone number. They gave him, he gave him all the information about him. He's like, so he must have been very confused, that somebody would submit this application to know all of his information. Then he said, but we know that it was him because defendant used these same doctored Wells Fargo statements to buy his house. He sent the similar statements that he sent to Fundera, which is also PayPal. I think PayPal bought Fundera or something like that. So they're like the same entity. That's what the indictment is about. It's not really about any of the other entities. It's just about Fundera. And so they said, but he used the exact same bank statements from Wells Fargo that he used to get his house, to the lender on his house in New Jersey. And so he said, he signed the mortgage. He was at the closing himself. I mean, it was a notary that he had to identify who he was at the closing. And he said, and he's the one that moved in there with his family. Like nobody else moved in there. So then he went over, he was like, we're going to go over the dates, which we talked about the various date. The date was, he opened the Wells Fargo account in April of 2017. I think it was April 7th. And then these bank statements were from dates that was either before the bank account was open or even after the bank account was closed. So it didn't stay open very long because he had negative $80 in it. But he was like, he had like, according to these statements, he had like $3 million in these accounts. He was like, is it just a coinky dink that the same bank statement with the exact same amount was used for the Fundera account that was used for his house that he lives in New Jersey? He said, no, it's not a coincidence because the same person applied for all of it. Then he said, and this is the same person that applied for the loan from FM Home Loans, from Beth Credit. This is not an identity theft. This is not some random church worker. This was the defendant. I was like, oh, okay, this is what we doing, sir. Then he said, then the Wells Fargo statements, they were found in his own email that was on his iPad. Then he said those same Wells Fargo statements were used to get a loan from Beth Page, and that $500,000 was received in his account. He got that money. So how do you got the same statements that you using for these other accounts? You're using it for this account, and you actually had a $500,000 that we can see in your bank account. So then he went over all the elements. I said, oh, this is about to be okay. So he goes. So then the government, they said, we're going to go over the elements, okay? Because some of y'all, I know you guys were asking. So he said, he goes and the prosecutor has a box. So he says, in or about June 18th in the Southern District of New York or elsewhere, Lamor Whitehead, the defendant, having devised and intending to devise a scheme and artifice to defraud and for obtaining money and property by means of false and fraudulent pretenses, representations, and promises, transmitted and caused to be transmitted by means of wire, radio, and television communication, interstate and foreign commerce, writing, signs, signals. They didn't say all that. They kind of broke it down. They said 200 and tried to get a $250,000 business loan. Whitehead made material misrepresentations regarding the finances of anointing management services, which representations were conveyed and in turn relayed to potential lenders through interstate wires and otherwise. So then he goes through and he says, scheme to defraud to obtain money. Check that box. So then they had like this automated thing with the box next to it. They had the check mark. He said, check that mark. So, okay. So then he said, participated knowingly. And they were like, we know it was knowingly because he doctored up the bank statements. And he was like, that's not the product of any type of thief or whatever. He said, in fact, he repeatedly did this. So we know he knew what he was doing. So ladies and gentlemen of the jury, check that box. So then the box got checked. So then he said, user calls other in interstate wire. He said the Fundora was received in an email in Manhattan and transferred to Pennsylvania. So that is another state. Defendant is guilty of count 5. You, ladies and gentlemen, can check that box. And that box was checked. Said, okay, let's go to count 1. Let's talk about Pauline Anderson. He used lies to convince Pauline Anderson to give him money from her retirement account. Defendant helped Rashid buy the house. He bought it. Like he helped him every step of the way. We went through all of that with Rashid's testimony. Anderson signed Rashid's mortgage with the help of defendant. So they put up the text on the screen of how Whitehead was the one that convinced Pauline Anderson to sign on for Rashid to get his house. Said after Rashid got his house, then his mom, Miss Anderson, wanted a house. So then he said, defendant was on the phone when it was a 3-way conversation when defendant was on the phone with her retirement fund company with Rashid Anderson. And Pauline testified that she only wanted to take $50,000 out as a down payment for a house. But Whitehead said, no, you should take $100,000. And they said, he said it for his own benefit. Defendant claimed when he was on the witness stand that he never talked to her. But we knew that was a lie because we looked at phone records. And the phone records show when there were 3-way calls. And he said when Anderson learned that she couldn't get a mortgage, Whitehead said, I can help you. I can help you. Defendant said on the stand. So like when Whitehead was on the stand, he said he never told Pauline Anderson that he would help her get a house. The government said that's a lie. It's a lie because we see text messages where Anderson said, buy a house. And then they highlighted it where he said, where Anderson in the text messages was talking about buying a house and said the defendant doesn't come back and deny it and say, what you talking about? Well, I don't know nothing about a house. He didn't come back and say nothing about it. That's because he knew that that's what the purpose of the money from. Then he says, defendant claims that Rashid is the one that defrauded his own mother. But that's not true. The evidence, he said, you have to look at the evidence. See, Whitehead gets on the stand and he had nothing to back up anything that he said. He just made these statements and you were supposed to believe it. But he said every single thing that Rashid and Miss Anderson said, they had something to back it up. And I told y'all that. They had text messages. They had emails. They had phone records. They had a cell tower marshal who was on there talking about where they were at different times. I mean, they backed up almost every aspect of their testimony. When Whitehead got on the stand, he was just like saying stuff, you know, and we'll get into that. But he was just saying stuff. he said, you keep saying Pauline that it was Rashid, but the defendant is the one who took the check from Miss Anderson. The defendant is the one who endorsed the back of that money order from Miss Anderson. Defendant is the one that got the money, and defendant is the one that spent the money. But what he didn't do, let's talk about what he didn't do, because we talked about what he did do. What he didn't do is buy her a house. We know that he offered and said, because there was a text message of which back in May when she asked for her money in 2021, Whitehead claimed he couldn't give her the money because it was already invested. So then the government said, we know that there was a text where he claims the money was already invested, but we know that he ain't invest no money because he never showed Pauline Anderson where this money was invested, never showed documentation. And then when the government asked, why don't you show us some documentation? And he never showed them any documentation. He said, you know why? You know why wasn't no documents? Because it was never a real business deal. It was a scam. As soon as he scammed her and that check cleared, he spent it on himself. Spent more than half of her money in the first 45 days. So then they listed again all of the logos of all the places he spent. Remember I told y'all it was the furniture store and Polo and I think Louis Vuitton. Why are you laughing? It was Louis Vuitton. They listed all of it. And we know it was her money because he only had $17,000 in the bank before he deposited her $90,000 and he spent $60,000. So we already know that he used some of her money just on basic mathematics. So how do we know that it's fraud? Defendant spent it on himself. Defendant lied about a contract. He tried to give us testimony that there was some private contract that was supposed to be between Pauline Anderson and her son. But we see the text where Pauline was like, what contract? What are you talking about? So he tried to cover himself by saying, quote, we had a contract. That's why we have contracts. You know how else we know it was a fraud? Number 3, the defendant keeps shifting the excuses for why he was not going to give her money back. He said, I will see you. He said, I'll give her money back. Then he said, I'll give you money back after my campaign. Well, first he said that it was already invested. Then he said he'll give it back after he gets done campaigning. Then when he got on the stand, he said, well, because it's caught up in a lawsuit, I can't give you your money back because it's all in a lawsuit. And my lawyer said that I shouldn't give you the money back because it's caught up in a lawsuit. So then he said some lawyer allegedly said, don't pay the money back. He said, but the thing is this, by the time he got this alleged advice from this alleged lawyer, the money was already spent. So he had already committed the crime. So we don't even know what you're talking about. That's not a legitimate excuse. Then he said, number 5, this is how we know that this is a fraud. The defendant threatened their job. So there was a text message where Whitehead basically was saying he was going to come after Rashid and Pauline for their jobs. And so he said, no legitimate investor threatens to come after your job. He said a real investor that actually makes real investments, they don't threaten you like that. So that's how we know. So then he says, let's pull up them elements again. So he goes on and he says, count 1. So then he goes to count 1. Let's go back up here to this indictment here. He said, he goes over the same thing and he says, defendant stole Miss Anderson's money. It was a scheme or artifice to defraud others or to obtain money or property by means of false or fraudulent pretenses. He said, and representation of promises. Check that box. Defendant did this scheme knowingly. Check that box. Said he never had a legitimate deal. It was all a scam. He just took her money and started spending it. So make sure you check that box. Use or cause others to use interstate wires to execute the scheme. He said interstate wires were used because there were transmissions through phone, there were calls, there were texts. He was like, so that's interstate transmission. Check that box. The defendant is guilty of count 1. Then he goes on to count 2 and 3. That's Brandon Belmonte about the extortion. So it's the attempted extortion. So then he goes on and says, defendant attempted to extort Belmonte between February and April of 2020. It doesn't matter if the defendant if Belmonte owed him money. So Whitehead's argument and what he said on the stand is that Belmonte owed him money and he was just giving the money back. Well, the government said it don't matter if they owed you money or not. It's the point of you using threats of force or violence that makes it a crime. Did y'all know that? I was like, okay. So he went through and said, let's talk about the threats. Let's look at the text message between the defendant and Belmonte. Well, first, let's start with the body shot. Remember, I told you guys about Belmonte's driver, Mr. Fernandez. Mr. Fernandez said that he went up there to try to get to try to pick up Belmonte because he was the driver. And he noticed Whitehead coming out the door and Belmonte right there. And Belmonte was in a submissive state where he had his arms behind his back, hands behind his back, but Belmonte was all in his face. Or whatever, just rah in his face. So they was like, that is threats. So that was the testimony that they used. So then they pull up the text messages and was like, or the recordings. It was a recording. So they had the transcripts to the recording. And what Belmonte did in the recording was mention how Whitehead got in his face. He said, you got in my face. I thought you were going to crack me to the white meat. So Belmonte is hashing this situation, I guess, that occurred in front of his driver. And Whitehead was like, so that's all they showed was laughing. Okay. So that was his response. So he was like, so the prosecutor or the government was just like, your response is laughing when somebody's basically saying that you were going to threaten to crack me to the white meat. Then he said, you had that big red ring on. So then the prosecutor puts a picture of Whitehead when he was running for Brooklyn Borough president. And he's sitting up there posing like this with his red ring on. So when Belmonte was like, I thought you was going to hit me with that big red ring. He showed the ring like this. It was in the picture in the corner like this with him showing the big old ring that he ain't wore not nan day at that trial. So they talked about defendant recorded threatening Belmonte. The defendant just never thought it would be played in this courtroom. And then it was other statements like they pulled up of Whitehead saying, you really playing with me? I will hurt you. So they put all them quotes up. Don't play with me. People are scared of me because, I step to my business. He told Brandon Belmonte, I'm not the one, Brandon. I don't play no games. It's about the principle. It's about the principle now. And then he said, there's guns in my church. You come in there, you gonna get shot. So they just like put all the quotes up that he said and all these audios and all of that stuff and put it on the board. He told the defendant said, if you don't pay the $5,000, basically he was going to hurt you. Talking about I will hurt you or something like that. So he put up the quote. That ain't the direct quote, but it was something around that line, So then he goes back through that again and goes through them good elements. Y'all know how it goes by now. He pulls up the elements and he said, let's go pull up count 2 of this good superseding indictment. So he said count 2. So then he goes through what? Was it attempted wire fraud? Let me see. No, I think it was count 3 with the extortion. Yeah, attempted extortion. So then he goes and he pulls up the attempted extortion. So he said, defendant intended to commit extortion, wrongfully tried to obtain property from Belmonte or victim 2, whatever number he is. Check that box. Completed it by wrongful force or violence. Check that box. Happened to interstate commerce. Check that box. Willfully took substantial steps in order to actually carry it out. Defendant is guilty of count 3. What? Then he goes to count 2. He said, often lies are more effective than a kernel of truth. The truth is, defendant did have a relationship with Mayor Eric Adams. Despite that, though, defendant knew he couldn't get favors from Mayor Eric Adams. He said he promised that he had access to and favors from the mayor, and he wanted Belmonte's property. So through all of these conversations, what Whitehead was saying is, I can get you meetings with the mayor, but in order for me to sit down with the mayor, basically Belmonte was going to have to turn the property over to Whitehead. Cause Eric's going to be like, yo, Lamar, like, do you own this property? So that's what he was trying to do. Say he had a meeting with Eric Adams and then have Belmonte turn some buildings over, or a building over that he owned called the Villa, I think it was. And he was going to have to come with that so he can help Belmonte with his stuff. It's just, yeah. He said that Belmonte would tell him where the money was. You know, he said Belmonte would tell him where the money was at. Defendant said Adams would help with his request for affordable housing. Defendant said, I got the keys to the city. Defendant said he can get the stop work order that we discussed before. Belmonte had a property called the Villa, and it was a stop work order on it. And I guess Whitehead said he could help him to get that removed because of his relationship with Mayor Adams. He said, yeah, I could talk to the mayor, but he has to say, yo, E, I own the property. So he like, yeah, I could talk to the mayor, but you're gonna have to basically turn this property over to me. So then the government said, were these representations material? Yes. How do you know defendant was lying? Because we saw the communications between the defendant and Adams. Text. So then they put up, it was almost awful though. They put up the text. Remember I told you how those Eric Adams texts were? So they put up the text message of like Whitehead in 2022 reaching out to Eric Adams, and Eric Adams it was a long text too, and Adams never responded. He was like, look at this. How did Adams respond? He didn't. And that's what they said. How did Eric Adams respond? He didn't. I was like, oh. So then he says, look up. He said, he puts up another text and he was like, how did Eric Adams respond? He didn't. And he basically was saying, yes, they had a personal relationship like that. But when it came to business, basically Eric Adams was not studying him like that. Said Eric Adams wasn't willing to do. So then the government puts up the flyer of when Whitehead was trying to run for Brooklyn Borough president. So it's Whitehead. Now Whitehead made this flyer himself. It was Whitehead and it was Adams on the flyer. So he sent it to Mayor Adams, and Adams basically told him, take me up off of that. I'm not endorsing you. I don't know if he was endorsing anybody at the time, but he definitely told him, I'm not endorsing you. Take that down. It's misleading. I'm not endorsing you, so take that down. So basically the government said it's not even unlawful for somebody to endorse you. But the mayor not studying you like that he don't even want to do nothing lawful to help you out. I was like, ouch. He could have easily endorsed you, but he chose that he didn't even want to endorse you, and he could lawfully do that. So we all know he wasn't doing nothing unlawful to help you. He said, then they put up the text where he said, brother, I am not endorsing you in the Brooklyn borough president race. Then they put up the February 16, 2022 text where Whitehead said, I've been calling you for months, but basically I couldn't get in touch with you, and I'm trying to get a meeting with you. So then the government is like summarizing it where he's basically saying people all get in touch with you. Everybody get you but me. You do things for other people, but you won't do it for me. He said, I'm fine though. I'm a big boy. I don't need you like that. It's all good. While he whining through this whole text message. And then Eric Adams didn't respond at all to that. So then you didn't hear any contact at all from Eric Adams for like weeks. So then on May 5th of 22, he said, good morning, E. Need to talk to you. What time can we speak? So then the government says, how does he respond? You guys guessed it. Put it in the chat. He doesn't. And that's exactly what the government said. He doesn't. So then they say on May 14, 2022, it was a text message where Whitehead sent to Belmonte pretending that he had a meeting scheduled with Eric Adams already, right? But then the government, they had another text message where 2 days later, he was texting Eric Adams' scheduler asking for a meeting, asking, can we meet, to his scheduler, Miranda. Then they said, how did Miranda respond? She didn't. So with Belmonte, you told him you had this meeting already, but of course, with this meeting, you can't even do the meeting allegedly until you own the property. But in theory, you didn't even have a meeting because they got the text message when you was trying to schedule the meeting. They didn't even respond to you. So then the government says, this kind of hurt my feelings too. I felt bad. I was looking like, dang, this is kind of bad. A little tear almost trickled down my eye. He said, defendant couldn't get endorsements from Mayor Adams. He couldn't get VIP tickets from Mayor Adams. He couldn't even get Mayor Adams to come to his birthday party. So we know he lied to Belmonte about what he can do to get properties to help him. He listed all the things. He said he wouldn't even come to your birthday party. I was like, dang, that's kind of sad. That's not sad, there.
Hell no.
And so then he goes, of course, they go to the count two. They got their little boxes next to it. And it says, scheme to defraud, lie to obtain property. You can check that box. Knowingly, with intent to defraud, he did it knowingly. He knew he didn't have the ability to get favors from Eric Adams. He's a liar. Check that box. Use interstate wires. So he had the conversations. It was between New Jersey and New York. Check that box. Defendant took multiple substantial steps. Check that box. Defendant is guilty of count two. Then he go to count four. I said, dang, this is a lot of counts. So then he go to count four. So count four is the material misrepresentation that he made to the FBI, right? Or the federal agents. So he said, defendant made false statements to the FBI agents. They asked if he had another phone, and he said he didn't have one. Defendant asked if he had another phone that he could he said the Whitehead testified that the agent really asked if he had another phone that he could be reached on, and he told him no. So he said that's a difference than just asking, do you have another phone? Do you have another phone? I call you, whatever. So Whitehead said he asked if he had another phone that he could be reached on. And he said, I'm not going to allow. He said no. And the government said, but you did have another phone to be reached on. He said, even if that's the truth, even if that is what you heard, you still did. It's still a lie. Okay. No matter which way you're trying to phrase this, it's still a lie. So then he said, you're not allowed to lie to the FBI just because you don't want them to call you. That's not how this works. So then he says the defendant made the statements to the agents, when they asked multiple times if they had other phones. He gave false answer that he had no other phone and he was using his daughter's phones. Said the defendants were false. Defendants knew they was false, and he made the statements knowingly. So you guys know he checked the box. Check. And it was just coming on the screen. As he was going through it, they was just checking the box. So then he said, defendant is guilty of count 4. Then he goes to the defendants. He goes over venue to let you know that all the venue was proper to be in the Southern District of New York because of where all these activities happen. I'm going to spare that. He said the defendant's testimony. The defendant has no burden, but he chose to testify. So I need you to scrutinize his whole testimony. You'll see defendant pretends to be one thing, but he's really another. On direct, he was calm. He was smiling at you guys. He knew and was already prepared what he was going to tell you. He was plain and clear and charismatic. He had an excuse for everything. Excuse for everything that he did. He had an excuse for. It was Rashid's fault. It was Belmonte's fault. It was the FBI's fault. It was my accountant's fault. It was everybody's fault but his fault. But the thing was, he ain't had no corroboration with none of his testimony. You know why Rashid was able to have corroboration for his testimony? This is what the government said. Because Rashid was actually telling the truth.
Dang.
I said, oh. They said on cross-examination, the bishop, well, they ain't never called him a bishop. They said, Mr. Whitehead, they said the defendant was evasive, agitated, angry. He wouldn't even answer. He couldn't answer basic questions. He pretended not to know if the bank statement was false or real on his face. He pretended, I don't remember. It's been so much testimony. I don't recall what the statement is. I don't know this and that. He didn't remember emails coming from his own email address. He was like, then basically they had to ask him questions more than one time for him to finally admit it. Said, you know why he had to lie? You know why he had to lie? Because he committed all of these crimes. That's why he had to lie on that stand. You guys have seen all this evidence. You've seen the videos. You've seen all the things that we done. Heard all the testimony. You know what happened. The truth has now caught up with him. Defendant has pretended to be a lot of things, including a multi-millionaire. The truth is, the defendant is a con man. He told lie after lie after lie. It is time to hold him accountable. The defendant is guilty. And that was the opening statement. They called him a con man.
Dang.
PR said no lies told. You know what? Y'all, it's 2000 and y'all hit that like button. So then Attorney Murray, I guess he works for Don Florio's office. I'm not really sure because Don Florio, I think she did cross-exam maybe one time that I saw. It might have been more. Maybe she did opening. I don't know. Remember, I was a little tardy a few times. I wasn't used to the traffic down there. But I only saw her do cross one time. But he introduced himself. It's kind of the thing that we do anyway. You introduce, you thank the jury, tell them they have a critical role. Our system is great, one of the greatest systems in the world. I'm impressed by your dedication in the role. It's not easy. It's vital to our system. It's a lot, going to trial. Okay, that's just the preliminary intros that a lot of times that we do. But Mr. Whitehead, by going to trial, he said just by his actions that he's not guilty of these crimes. The burden is never on him, regardless of him getting on that stand. Then he said, trial is like buying a house. You have to check the interior and the exterior. After viewing the evidence, this house is not sound. There's cracks in the floors. There's termites. There's a lot of things wrong with the government's evidence. He said, count one, the government has not proven beyond a reasonable doubt that defendant defrauded Ms. Anderson. He had no intent to cause financial loss to Pauline Anderson or Belmonte. Then he goes through the other counts that there's not beyond a reasonable doubt as to Belmonte, not beyond a reasonable doubt as to false statements. He's saying none of these were proven beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not been proven that he is the one that submitted the documents at all. It has not been proven. He has not been ID'd as the person that submitted those false documents. Anyone can swear they are telling the truth and they lie. But his client ain't lying. He said, all of us watch all these shows like CSI and Law and Order. He was like, I like Matlock. I'm the old school. But TV is not like real life. I submit that Mr. Whitehead's testimony will shows that he is not guilty. Then he says, I'm going to give top 10 reasons why he's not guilty. And then he would throw in the numbers every now and then. So I don't even know what the really top 10 is. So I think he went down one time and it was 5. I said, oh. He said, there is no proof of identity from Fendora. If you recall the evidence, Fendora has no idea who submitted the documents. Defendant didn't even know what Fendora was prior to this trial. Now, remind you, Fendora actually declined his application, so it didn't go through. So that's not one of the ones where he actually got any money from. He just submitted the application. But the thing was, the same documents, the bank statements and stuff that he used for Fendora was the same documents that he used for his house and he used for FM home loans, which I think is how he got those apartment buildings, and Beth Page, where we know he actually got that deposit of money. He said there's no confirmation who the people at Fendora was talking to. No representation from Fendora came on this stand and said they spoke to Lamor Whitehead. The government did not submit credible evidence that defendants submitted those falsified bank statements. Whitehead's identity was stolen. He was the victim of identity theft. There are no calls of outgoing records or incoming calls. Defendant testified that there's numerous people that has had access to his accounts. So then he brings up what I just told you, that the Beth page, he's not charged with that, which he is not, where he actually did get the money from. That's not where his charge is. So he brings that up, like, you guys have to be reminded, he is not charged for the Beth page. That was just really used to show the pattern and practice, or the MO. And so he said he hasn't been charged with that. Said pay attention to the lack of identity beyond a reasonable doubt. They have not proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Lamor Whitehead uploaded those documents. So then he goes to Pauline and said, Pauline had a deal with Rashid Anderson. So if you want to look at the person that took advantage of Miss Pauline Anderson, it was her son, Rashid. Pauline was not a member of his church. Y'all knew that was going to come. She letting y'all know she's not a member of the church. She never paid tithes. She did sow a seed at one time, but that's optional. And she only came to the church twice. Rashid came to Mr. Whitehead because he was interested in making more money. So he wanted to learn how to invest. And he didn't have any money to invest. And Whitehead told him, if you want to invest with me, you got to have some money. Then he says he went to get a house, and they only approved him a $250,000 to get him a house. So he had to have his mom co-sign. Pauline Anderson testified she didn't understand. But why didn't Rashid explain it to her? That she didn't understand that if she co-signs, she may not be able to get a house herself. So then he goes on and says, Rashid is the one that got the cashier's check on November 30th, 2020. The agreement was made between Lamor Whitehead and Rashid, and the money was supposed to be invested for a year at $100 per month. The money, that was supposed to be the agreement. That wasn't in the contract. So the government has no text in 4 months of Lamor Whitehead asking for this $90,000. So what he's referring to is in July of 2020 is when Pauline Anderson took the $90,000 out of her account, or took the $100,000. She actually took $100 because she wanted $10 in order to cover taxes. So she took $100,000 and put in her account. However, this money order was not made to Lamor Whitehead until November. Now, the reasoning behind that is because at first there was a process of which Miss Anderson was going to the guy, Mark Kaplan, I guess, who was a loan agent who actually helped Rashid get a house. And he was originally trying to help Miss Anderson. But because she owed money, she had like loans for student debt that she had for her nephew and I think her daughter or something. Nephew and somebody else. Nephew needs somebody. But she had 2 student loans out. She didn't qualify. And so now she ain't qualified to get any loans. So then that's why the money sat. And then I guess this whole idea of I can invest your money and get a house or whatnot. That's when that came out, like four months later. So then he says Rashid talked to Whitehead about talking to his mom. Whitehead never directly talked to Pauline Anderson. It was always Rashid. Rashid was the one that was calling her. Rashid was like, my mama is tripping. She don't want to co-sign or whatever. And so Whitehead was the one that decided he was going to, call to discuss it with her and help him out. The only communications prior to the text. So Whitehead alleges he never had communications like that with Pauline Anderson until she asked for her money back in a text in May of 2021. They started talking about Rashid not fully and explaining. They were on Rashid and Pauline Anderson for a while. That's what they were. It was like Rashid never fully explained to his mom. Basically the lawsuit. The only reason why Pauline Anderson sued Whitehead was because Rashid and Whitehead fell out. I don't know what that got to do with anything, but that was said. So they say the $90,000 loan from Pauline was supposed to be for Rashid so Rashid can invest. Rashid put himself first. He put his mama on the loan knowing that she wanted her own dream house, but he basically prohibited her from getting her own house because he's so selfish. Rashid didn't help his mom look for a house. Once the $90,000 was there, even though this allegedly supposed to be Rashid's investment, he never helped her even look for a house. So then he goes into, let's talk about tithes. I'm sure you church people like this. He said tithes comes from the Bible. It says to donate 10% so the congregation can be run. There's nothing strange or wrong about taking tithes. It's biblical. And then they just jump back into Rashid didn't explain the impact of co-signing for his mom. Rashid wasn't honest with his mama or Lamor Whitehead. Lamor Whitehead accepted Rashid's representations related to his mom. Rashid bought a 5-bedroom house, but didn't let his mom, aunt, and grandma, who lived on the 3rd level of their apartment building and had to walk up 3 flights, he didn't let them win with them. He didn't let them live with them. He said, right, so Rashid said he didn't know what a seller's concession is. And he's a real estate. He actually has a real estate license. So he's not credible. He's not credible. None about Rashid is credible because he didn't know what seller's concession was. To say he doesn't know what a seller's concession is, but he's actually a real estate broker. Rashid was just worried about pushing his own deal. And then they go in because remember there were texts where, Lamor Whitehead was Lamor Whiteheading with his words and stuff. So they were harsh words. So then they got to, bring that down. So they said, yes, Rashid and Lamor Whitehead, they had a close relationship. And when it ended, there were some harsh words because they were so close. There was a lot of emotions involved. That's why Whitehead was talking like that. Then Pauline comes and said she's going to press charges. She was going to call the press. She was going to call the police. She was going to call his campaign. And he said, but Rashid was on the stand and he wasn't willing to admit that his mother was threatening Lamor Whitehead. Why? Because Rashid Anderson is not credible. Rashid promised his mom he would get her a house. That was not Lamor Whitehead's promise. The agreement was between Rashid and Pauline. And then he said the agreement Pauline was talking about didn't make any sense. So then he says, Pauline, and in September 2021, Pauline Anderson sues. Pauline testified that she didn't get any money back. But once Pauline sued, there was a disagreement and it's in court. It's supposed to be rectified in court. So we said that he couldn't give her money back. Then he said, remember the text? Because Whitehead did say, I guess, it was one text where he said that he would work with Pauline Anderson himself and do a contract if she felt that would make her feel more comfortable if they did a contract. So then he said, Mr. White, because he's such a stand-up guy, even though him and Rashid fell out, she said that Lamor Whitehead offered to do another contract with just him and Pauline Anderson, because he was doing it out of good faith. So he gets into Eric Adams and he talks about the government brought selective text. It shows that Eric was a mentor, but they've had many private conversations. These were just excerpts. And what it does confirms is the things that Lamor Whitehead said, that he was close to Eric and he could probably, y'all catch this. He could probably get a meeting faster than others. Because he showed he had a relationship with them. He could probably get a meeting with Eric Adams faster than others. He never promised anything that he knew he couldn't deliver. Said Eric didn't make any endorsements for Lamor Whitehead, but he didn't make any endorsements, I think he said, in the primaries either. Said the texts show they are very close. The government says after 2 months he hadn't responded. But he was just inaugurated as the mayor, so he was busy. Look at all the texts, including when he had a missed call from Eric. He had a phone. Remember I told you guys there was a FaceTime of which Eric Adams had called, and there was a mixed call, and he called Brandon Belmonte, I guess, to show him that. So he's like, look, Eric called him, and it was a missed call. So he was like, look at all the text message. They were close. He said he could get a meeting faster than most people. Nothing about his conversation about grants and etc. and all of that is illegal. He was being honest. Then they go into the FBI situation about the phone. And he said the FBI asked if he had another phone that he could reach him on. And he said, you don't have any phone that we can call you on? And he said, so then, now this was pretty good. I'm gonna give it to the defense on this one. So then they said, imagine you have a personal and a work phone. He was like, and then the client says, do you have another phone that I can call you on? And you're like, no, because you're not giving them the personal phone. You just giving the work phone. He said, but does that mean that you're lying? That doesn't mean that you're lying. I was like, that was a good little reach, you know. He said Lamor Whitehead didn't want the FBI to call him. That's the reason why. He said that's the family line. The FBI cannot call him on his family phone. If they would have asked him if he had another phone, period, that would have been different. Then somehow we was back on we went back to Miss Anderson. Ask yourself, does the agreement make sense? Lamor Whitehead's on the mortgage and he takes all the risk. And he'll be left with that. You can't even sign a deed over till you pay the mortgage. So he got back on Pauline. Then he says there was no escrow account. So basically he could have done what he wanted to with the money because it was just in a regular account. So it wasn't like it was up and he was the fiduciary for her money, that it wasn't no escrow account. So he brings that up. So he says with count 3, there was no attempted extortion against Belmonte. He said his temper, when we heard them crazy, those crazy audios and all of that stuff, he said he was pissed off because his wife had just had a baby and she suffered from postpartum. So neither of them was getting any sleep because they just had the baby. So when the car accident happened and he was trying to get the car fixed, Belmonte was basically lying, saying that the car was being fixed when it wasn't. So all of him going off on Belmonte had to do with him not doing what he was supposed to do with the car. Not because it was, you got to give me this $5,000. So it wasn't extortion. He's saying he just wanted the car fixed. Then he said with the $5,000, he said there was no, it was supposed to be for reimbursement for a rental. So Belmonte claims he gave him an Escalade and paid $12,000 for Escalade. Whitehead is claiming that the Escalade was shaking and his wife was so irritated because she just had this baby and she got to deal with car seats and all of that. So she was like, you need to do something about this car like ASAP. So they was just, wife was tripping because she just had the baby. So in turn, he was aggravated. So I guess Belmonte said, why don't you just go ahead and you get you a go get the rental and I'll reimburse you. So that's supposed to be where the $5,000 was. Then he said, do y'all believe Belmonte saying that he paid $12,000 for a rental? Then about the $500,000, he said Belmonte was supposed to be a hard money loan lender. Whitehead declined to take the $500,000 because remember, Whitehead was trying to get the $500,000. He told Belmonte he need to get them fire escapes, them wooden fire escapes that we was looking for over there in Connecticut. Let me see if I got them. See if I got you. There you go.
In the rain, y'all. Slowing down the rain, but we working. We are working, y'all. Working. Stairs complete. Whitehead Estates, y'all. Coming all together.
So that's the $500,000. He said in the middle of one of the conversations, he said, hey, could you lend me the $500,000? I need to get some fire escapes and I need to do some repairs on my building. And so he asked Belmonte to get the $500,000. He alleged to Belmonte that he had people, he was in the process of refinancing, so he only needed the loan for like 2 months because they hard money lenders. He said so he was already in the process of refinancing, and so he just needed his $500 so that he can go ahead and get this fire escapes and stuff together. And so Belmonte basically was like stringing her along like he was going to give him the money, but he wasn't about to give him no money. So they brought that up and said Belmonte was supposed to give him the money as a hard money lender. He wasn't trying to extort him in exchange for the business relationship with Adam. So yeah. Then he adds in there, he had to add in the rest of the $5,000 because I told you part of it was the rental. And then the judge asked on Whitehead's examination, the judge was like, you paid $5,000 for the rental? And Whitehead was like, well, when I got the car, the axle was messed up. So I had to take it back and get the axle fixed. Now, what was tripping me out about all of this is there was not one receipt, not one. If you get a car rental, there's going to be a receipt. If you get an axle fix, you're going to get a receipt. Like none of this it's like you literally have all of these alleged explanations, but there was no receipts to anything. And it was quite annoying, actually. I was like, why are you saying this stuff? And you're saying things that are easy to confirm as to whether it happened again. But like the government said, it really is about the threats. It doesn't matter even if you owed the money. But I mean, it would have made him look better if, I guess. I don't know if anything would have made him look better. I'm just reaching. I don't know what this was.
Hell no.
So then he says, he talks about he says, so count 2 and 3, the government requires you to speculate. We don't have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Then he talks about the guns in the church and talks about how Whitehead was robbed at gunpoint in his church. This was the most, so basically the fact that he had armed security was sensical. But see, the stuff with Belmonte was like from February to June, I think, or February to May. The problem with that is the robbery would have been after the fact. But I'm not going to, they ain't bring it up. I ain't going to bring it up. But it was, he said because of the robbery. So he said he needed armed security. So he said the defendant did not lie. He did not make any materially false statements. When he says, you know, I can tell you where the money is, when he was talking to Belmonte, he was referring to grants. He just submits that he has access to Adams faster than the average person, which is entirely true. Listen, I don't know. Based on them texts, I don't even know Adams, but I probably could email him. He might call me back a little bit faster. I don't even know that man, but I feel like I have a sneaky suspicion that if I call him or email him, he might pick. I probably could get on his calendar a little bit faster, but then they talked about how like Brandon was like, what do you do? Pay people off? And Whitehead was like, no, I don't never have to do that. I don't never have to pay nobody off. That ain't how we do it. So they were saying that he was letting them know he doesn't do anything illegal with what he was trying to do with Brandon Belmonte. So then he said, we're hearing the recordings in a different context. Whitehead was talking about his connections by saying he had the key to the city. He was talking about his connections, which isn't a lie. But I ain't hear no connections in the whole trial. But he said it ain't a lie. That's what he said. He said Brandon Belmonte was the one that was bringing up Eric Adams. There is no proof beyond a reasonable doubt. He said, I'm close with the mayor. I can get a meeting with him. We can make a lot of money. All of that is true. So he didn't lie. Then he said, Lamor Whitehead makes sense. The government said Lamor Whitehead always has an excuse for everything. He has an excuse. You know why he has an excuse? But ladies and gentlemen, because he's not guilty. That's why he has an excuse. He was clear on that stand about what he did or did not remember. It's been a lot of testimony in this case. He does not have perfect recollection of everyone's testimony. I submit there might have been a little bit of bragging or marketing about Eric Adams, but it wasn't a false statement. Then he goes back to count 3 and talks again about his wife having postpartum, and he had, the temper and all of that, but he wasn't trying to extort him. Then he goes back to talk about there was no evidence that he submitted those documents, not beyond a reasonable doubt on the identity. So we don't know who submitted them. So then it says, we come to an end, ask yourself, did they have a case or did they try to make up a case? This case is not open and shut. It's full of reasonable doubt. All of you guys have come from different backgrounds, but one thing you guys all have in common is common sense. You can evaluate critically, evaluate all the testimony, evaluate the counts, evaluate all the exhibits, and I believe it'll be clear to you that you'll come back with a verdict that's correct. Lamor Whitehead is not guilty. No. That is the defense. That is the synopsis of the defense. So then, after we ate a little 30-minute lunch, government has the last say because they have the burden, and they had a rebuttal. And that rebuttal, they said all the defendant talks about is to look at the defendant's testimony. But we can't listen to anything the defendant says because he got on that stand and he just lied. His arguments are all distractions, trying to focus on irrelevant issues and irrelevant people that just don't matter to this case. Focus on the evidence, focus on the truth. Defendant talks about the standard. It's nothing magical about the standard. The government has met its standard. It's met its burden. Counts 5 in the 2018 loan app. No proof of identity. Talking about no proof of identity? Someone else submitted the documents, huh? But the proof of identity is overwhelming. Most powerful proof is who would benefit from all of the loans and the money. Defendant bought a mansion, thousands of dollars on Gucci, thousands of dollars on Louis. Why would someone else submit these documents for the defendant to benefit from the documents that are submitted? This is not some church member or some accountant that may or may not be dead. This was the defendant. He said defendant's testimony, he lied in so many different ways, it was uncomfortable. To watch someone sit on that stand and comfortably lie and lie over and over again. After being shown these bogus statements, it took repeated questions for him to admit that these statements were fake. I asked if he knew if he had $3.8 million in the bank. He lied and said he didn't know how much it is. Really? A man who tracked down someone and threatened them, Brandon Belmonte, for $5,000, didn't know if he had $3 million in the bank? Really? The man who told Rashid, keep track of every dime I gave you so you can subtract it from the $90,000 that your mama say that I owe her? He said he's talking about Rashid as a distraction because this ain't even about Rashid. He wants you to forget about Pauline's testimony because based on her testimony alone, he's guilty. Things thrown out. Rashid is not being tried, so it doesn't matter. He said that he never talked to Pauline Anderson, but the T-Mobile records show on the phone that he was on the phone with Transamerica when the money was being transferred. Defendant was the one that said to take the $100,000 out instead of $50,000. Defendant said that he would take the money to get a house. Defendant lied and tried to flip it and make it seem like all the statements came from Rashid, but didn't come from Whitehead, which is a mischaracterization of the testimony. Rashid testified he didn't take any money. He didn't make any promises, and that was corroborated by text messages. Even if we're taking what Whitehead said, that means he defrauded Rashid then. We want to take him. We'll just say that he defrauded Rashid. Defendant argues that Pauline and Rashid had different understandings of what the deal was. Pauline may not understand, but she knew the core terms of the deal. She said she was going to the police because a crime was being committed, i.e., you took my money. It does not matter if the defendant thinks that Pauline was careless, gullible, or negligent. He agreed because he was trying to scam her. He never planned on getting her a house. See, she goes on to Belmonte. He said, a 45-year-old man threatened Belmonte with guns and shots, said, I will hurt you. That was not a person getting frustrated. That was threats of violence. You cannot use threats. It is against the law, even if you think a person deserves it. No. He said, and then let's talk about the FBI. First, he told the FBI was his daughter's phone. Then we heard it was his company's phone. And then when he was on the stand, it was the family lie. It was the family line. It's all a lie. It doesn't matter why he lied. The point is he lied. He lied to a federal agent. Defendant wants you to blame everyone else but him. In order to believe him, though, you have to believe he has got to be the most unluckiest person in the world. If he didn't commit this crime, this is some bad luck. He would have to be so unlucky that all the witnesses must have come together to frame him. Everyone decided to perjure themselves. Now you're talking about some mystery church member or person defrauded you. Now you got identity theft. Instead of keeping the money like you were supposed to do with Pauline Anderson, this fraudster made sure all the money went to, he said, basically she was saying that you blaming all these different people, but instead of them keeping it for themselves, whoever this fraudster is that took your identity, they decided to do all this stuff and then give you the money and put it in your account. So whoever took your identity, they said, but you know what? We like you like that. We're not going to keep it for ourselves. We're going to use your identity and then give you the money that we took using your identity. So then she said, all the text messages coincide with Pauline Anderson and Rashid's testimony. Defendant is so unlucky. He happened to go on a shopping spree after cashing Pauline Anderson's check. Excuse after excuse, lie after lie, con after con. That's what the lady said. There is overwhelming proof. Defendant isn't unlucky. He is just a man. And the truth is the defendant is guilty. He lied over and over. Defendant thought he could fool person after person. And he thinks he's above the law and thought he could come in this courtroom and he could fool you too. The only fair and just burden is to find the defendant, Lamor Whitehead, guilty. And that is the end of the rebuttal. And then at around 2:45-ish, the jury went out to deliberate. And so we sat there and we sat there and we sat there, right? So then at about, they were supposed to go till 5 o'clock. So then right before 5 o'clock, they said they went back there to check them and they said they wanted to go till 6 o'clock. So then at about 5:48, they get a note where they ask, can they stay for an additional hour? Now, this was literally at like 4:58. By 6:01, they had a verdict. Count 1, guilty. Count 2, guilty. Count 3, guilty. Count 4, guilty. Count 5, guilty. So he has 14 days because you go to pre-trial services. I can't even talk. I don't know, I'm tired. You go to pretrial services after 14 days, and they put what's called a pre-sentencing report, like they do all your background. You go there with your attorney, get all your background. The judge was like, I need you to make sure that you give honest and accurate information when you go, because that helps me on making my decision, because she has to sentence him. So well, that's not going to help him, because your sentencing memorandums could really help your client. I've gotten objections. I've got it can really help yourself. But anyway, Dev trying to talk to me on the side. I'm trying to be professional here. So then he says, so then on, I think it's the June 10th, the defense has to turn in their sentencing memos. And then on June 17th, the government has to turn in whatever report. And then his sentencing date is July 1st of 2024. I know it's a long time. So then the defendant asked that bail be continued. He said, he's been on since 2022. He's been diligent. He's come to all his court appearances. There's no indication of flight risk. He has strong family ties. He lives in Paramus with his wife and his children. Okay. So we wanted to continue. The government got up and said they have not shown by clear and convincing evidence that he won't flee. I think he's a flight risk. I think we should revoke it. I was like, dang. And so she said, would you like me to continue as to why? And the judge was kind of like, no, you can just, because it's late. She basically was letting her know, like, I already made my decision on what I'm going to do. So the judge found that he was not likely to flee. He didn't pose a danger. He has abided by his current bail and has been satisfactory while on bail. He does not have crimes of violence. And basically he has to continue with his bonds and, abide by all those conditions and show up on the sentencing date. And they'll probably file a motion to try to set it aside, try to say it wasn't enough evidence or something like that, or a motion for a new trial. It's probably what the government is going to do in the interim while all this is happening. So let's see what we are facing here. Let's see. So for 18 U.S.C. 1951, interference with commerce by threats of violence, that is 20 years. Now, when you have these are like maxes. When you have sentencing guidelines, there are so many factors. So that doesn't necessarily mean like that's what you're going to get. I'm just showing you what the statute says. Okay, let's go to the next one, because I know that's going to be y'all next question. So I'm just going to beat y'all to it. Oh, wait a minute. Attempted conspiracy. I think that's the same as, let me go find the original conspiracy. I'll get to the comment. Fraud by wire. Wire fraud under 18 U.S.C. 1343. It has such person shall be fined not more than $1 million or prison not more than 30 years. Then we have, and I'm just looking up from what they said the codes were. And again, the sentencing memo, you have, it's a lot of factors. He does have a past, so that's going to factor in. When you don't have a criminal history, usually works for you. There's a lot of factors to go over the sentencing guidelines, to be a whole PAMU to go over sentencing guidelines. False statements under the section that they put is, does that say 8 years? Not more than 8 years. I think that's it. Let me look at a few of your questions before I lay down, because maybe I'm tired. He said he's going live at 11:30. Oh, that's nice. Going to auction his belongings in the conversation. Well, there is a forfeiture on his. He does have a forfeiture on his indictment. I'm sure he's gonna appeal it. You know, he's gonna ask for a new trial and he's gonna appeal it. Um, I think the Belmonte thing is still just a little, quirky for me. I think once Belmonte got indicted, and I was kind of looking at how long he's been working with the government, it just seemed a little bit. I would have approached the Belmonte situation a little bit different. Remember, guys, when I said it, I'm like, you doing all this? If you owe these people money, just pay them their money back. Just imagine how much he could have avoided by just paying them the money back. Let's just say you were in court. At least be like, okay, I got 20,000. You out here trying to threaten people to fight them for $1,000,000. You tried to fight DL, Hughley, anybody you got into it that had a little bit of following. You trying to put up $1,000,000, and it's like, but you owe this lady really $85,000 because he did pay her 84,000 because he paid her 5,000 and paid her 1,000. If you want to be technical, but all this interest to me is back to 90,000. But it's like if you would have just paid this lady her money, then they wouldn't have had no reason to be going into all of your finances and all of that stuff. So it was. I wasn't shocked. I said it when I seen evidence, and then I seen that he was the only witness, and then I saw that he didn't corroborate anything. I was like, it's not, you really did you didn't give the jury anything to even work with. You know what? He doesn't have a passport, so he'll drive to Texas and swim across the border to Mexico. Y'all need to cut it out. Oh my goodness. If y'all stop saying this man is out. Let me look at these super chats. Let me see if it's any. Miss B said, thank you for staying on top of this story. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for the support and the super chat. Thank you for the super sticker. Sin said, thank you for all your hard work. Thank you. And Rain gifted 5 memberships. Thank you so much, Rain. Thank you, Mahogany, for the super sticker. You said Pam Esquire is one of the most excellent legal content providers. Thank you, Revival Concept Corporations. I appreciate you. Thank you, Queen Gwen, for the super sticker. Thank you, Julie, for becoming a member. Open doors of opportunity. Thank you for the super chat. Lady Nez 910 said, appreciate all your hard work. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. Miss MJ, thank you. Can we get his prison? You know what? I am 100% sure he will perform his best clown con act via global sale. Well, he would. This is federal. That's not public record that I know of. That's why R. Kelly was trying to sue, because someone within recorded it. And that's why our whole R. Kelly thing happened. You are so welcome, GC. Thank you so much, Patrice. Welcome to the Intellects. Lakeisha said, thank you, Pam. Thank you. And Crystal, thank you so much. I got some, let me see, go to the bottom. If y'all have some questions at the top, you don't have to hit re-enter them. See the cash apps. I got the members. We gave a lot of cash apps today. I thank y'all so much. Simone and Kimberly, thank you. Amy, Ginger, Pamela, love your name. Andretta, you know what? My sister Val, thank you. Jacqueline, thank you. Yolanda, Sandra, Ray, Mel, Deborah, Ray, thank you, Ray. Bridget sent Bridget again. You guys sent Dev some love too. I'm gonna have to give him his little cut. Give him his cut because he was out there. So let me tell you guys. So first of all, Dev worked all day Friday, all day Saturday. He played for 2 churches on Sunday. So we left at like 5 o'clock to come here. So I drove like 5 hours. And then when it was time for Dev to drive, it was like the middle of the night. It was in Pennsylvania. It was a snowstorm. The winds was going like this. Our car was moving this way. It was bad. It was a bunch of accidents. So then we ended up just getting a room. So then at about 5 this morning, we drove into New York. So that's why I got there around 10:30-ish this morning. And then Dev had to go get the room, get everything together because I went straight to the court. And then we usually leave at 5. And so he was there at 4:30 because he don't ever want me to wait because, you know, he said I look too much like a tourist. So he gets concerned about me because, you know, he's from these parts. So it's like, he thinks somebody gonna snatch me up or something. So he's like, you look like a tourist. Why you at?
Looking around?
So he's there at 4:30. So I text like, well, they said they're gonna go till 6. So he was like, okay. Then when they said they was gonna go to 7, I was like, shoot, he might leave me down here. So he stayed in that car for like 3 hours waiting on me. So shout out to him. He's the real MVP.
And haven't been to sleep yet.
And he hasn't been asleep yet. Tyra, thank you so much. Felicia and Alice and Angela and Deborah, Joy, Sharonda, Trista, Valerie, and Lolisa. Lolisa was the first one earlier. Like, girl, let me go ahead and pay for your little lunch. Thank you so much, Lolisa. Thank you for all of y'all love. I appreciate it. Oh, he has a statement. He can't not be quiet. Like, for what?
See?
I know. Val says she's still from Detroit. Listen, he's gonna say he's gonna appeal, I'm sure. I mean, that's expected.
Val said she was gonna send you a cash up for it.
And she did. D Queen, thank you. You said all our fire starters, he's going under the jail, 10 toes down. You know what? Oh. All right, y'all. Well, I guess we'll see what he has to say. I did see that Nesto had a he had a hearing. I didn't watch it. So I'm gonna watch it. Then maybe tomorrow I'll talk about it. But I'll see what he got to say if he got something, you know. You better not talk about me because I was very, very respectful. I ain't pay you no attention while I was there. I took my little notes, you know, looked me in my eyes like this. I kept it moving. I wasn't gleeful because I ain't gleeful when people go to prison. Now, sometimes you just do things and it's just avoidable. And you know, it's like some of this stuff is just avoidable. So kind of is what it is. I wasn't shocked. So, and I know half of you guys ain't shocked neither. So anyway. All right, y'all. Y'all have a good night. Thank you guys for watching my rendition of Court TV. This is my live streaming of Lamor Whitehead. My day in court. Again, he was found guilty on all 5 counts. Apparently, he's going to make a statement. So we'll see what that is. You guys have a good night. Hopefully, I could even stay awake for his statement because I'm tired. But I love each and every one of you guys. Thank you again for all the support. I told you guys I was going to see this through to the end, and I have seen it to the end. So hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure you hit the like, subscribe if you have not done so already, and I'll talk to you guys next time.